Hey guys, it's John. You're on the JRB Tree Climbing channel. We had a poll in my Facebook group yesterday asking what the team would like to see next in terms of video content. And this is what I'm calling the universal version of my climbing system. You see, I've been rope climbing for about 15 years and innovating along the way. And a couple years ago, I started a YouTube channel to show you a unique and novel climbing method that we called the JRB climbing method. Not anticipating I'd come up with another unique method that we're calling hitch climbing. And we've got different systems optimized for those two methods. But the challenge has been, can we create a single system which we can use for JRB stationary doubled rope, or we could use it for moving rope system, or we could use it for SRT, or we could use it for hitch climbing, and we wouldn't need any mechanical devices, and we wouldn't need to tie any friction hitches at the climb site. And we've accomplished that with this system. Now we're going to be drawing upon tools already in our toolbox. This is the JRB Garda Hitch Foot Loop with integrated redundancy. This is my favorite foot apparatus, and there's a separate video on that. These are two different versions of a pole that we can use for setting a hitch in a tree. Whether we're SRT climbing with a really long pole, or if we're hitch climbing and alternating between them. This is just a collapsible hiking stick. This is a telescoping painter's pole. And there's many different versions. Separate video on that. And this is the system. Coming in at 5 pounds, I have 80 feet of Maxim Canyon Elite. We want a rope that's good for SRT. I prefer, although I can do this on 8mm, I prefer something more substantial. And this system has 6 friction hitches in it. So I'm going to take that apart and show it to you right now. So for starters, on both ends of the system, we've got the JRB End Loop, which we use for rigging. Next, I've got an agile hitch replacing the JRB Ascender, simply because I may want to reconfigure the system. I may want to remove these if they're in my way for a hitch climb. This would go up and over a tree crotch, back down the other side. And on the other side of the system, we've got another agile hitch. That's for the stationary doubled rope climb. On the other side of the system, we have effectively a hitch climbing system. In hitch climbing, I prefer to climb towards the end of the rope, to set a hitch with the end of the rope and climb on it. So we've basically got 2 miniature SRT systems. This is a JRB Ascender in the compact non-jamming mode with a Rappel ring that I'll clip into. That's for my bridge. And beneath it, another compact JRB Ascender with a foot loop. Everything here was tied with 6 feet of material, 6 feet of 7mm cord, 6 feet of 7mm cord, 6 feet of webbing. All of the hitches in the system were tied with 6 feet. And we'll do a separate video on building a system. Okay, so that is one side, and below it, I've got an identical pair of hitches going the opposite direction for hitch climbing. Now we may need to slide these into place to get them where we need to go, but if we're fumbling around in the dark, we won't be tying any hitches. Okay, let's look at the entire system from top to bottom. On the right side is the hitch climbing system, and on the left side is the stationary doubled rope system. Starting with the end, I've got an end loop into my first agile hitch. Length of rope, down the other side, the other agile hitch holding in the opposite direction. That's the stationary doubled rope side of the system. On the right side, I've got the hitch climbing system. That's a 523 compact non-jamming JRB Ascender tied onto a Rappel ring. And I use that ring simply because it's unambiguous in terms of where to clip into such a compact hitch when you need to do so in the dark. That's an identical hitch, this one fashioned as a foot loop. A length of rope, and the other side is identical but holding in the opposite direction. There's my foot loop, and there is the friction hitch onto the end of the rope, and another JRB End Loop, which I do use for certain rigging scenarios that we'll talk about in the future. Okay, now we're going to go in the woods. We're going to do a couple of quick climbs. Again, I'm going to show you JRB stationary doubled. I'm going to show you some DRT or MRS. I'm going to show you SRT, and I'm going to show you a quick hitch climb. Okay, so let's do a little climbing. Here's the system. I've arrived at a tree that's got a paracord preset. You can see my prior videos on how I stash these in the tree. Got a piece of deadwood holding it up. I've got paracord presets that have been in the woods for a dozen years, and if they dry rot, I just replace them. Got the friction hitch on there. It can't get lost in the tree crotch. It can't get lost. If for any reason it can't go through the tree crotch, that's the nice thing about these agile hitches, is that we can remove them. Now, you've seen me double rope climb how many times? We're just going to do it now on a pair of agile hitches. That's all. I haven't showed you this new bridge yet. You'll see that soon. I've got a new adjustable bridge. Okay, so I'm probably going to float around because I'm so high up with this particular tree. So you might see my back, you might see my front. But let's go up about halfway. So as soon as I get off the ground, or before, I always make sure I got my best friend engaged, my redundancy. Okay, let's stop here about 15, 16 feet off the ground. Instead of doing a separate climb, I'm going to show you how the JRB, the stationary double rope system, is actually a moving rope system as well, if we want it to move. Now, in a saddle hunting situation, the only times I've ever converted to a moving rope system, the only time, is when I want to fine-tune my position. If I took off my foot loop and I had my Munter engaged and I just want to fine-tune my position, I could just pull on one side, system moves. That's just a regular old MRS system, and you can work it from either side. So although a saddle hunter might not want to use this feature, not true of an arborist. An arborist might want to climb a tree with stationary double rope and then transition into moving rope, as it affords a better control in the canopy when doing stunts like limb walking. But we generally don't need that as a saddle hunter. Again, converts to moving rope system, and we could do it many ways. We can use our foot loop. We could put our foot loop on, moving rope system. In practice, the only times I've used it are to adjust my position, or if I forgot my foot loop. If I forgot my foot loop, you can simply climb MRS. This is an old-fashioned leg loop. Okay. All right, I'm not going to go any higher. Let's come on down. Let's see SRT next. Okay, now let's see some SRT. Now, I'm asked regularly, John, why don't you SRT climb? And the answer I have is because there's really no advantages. There's no sense in setting an anchor when you don't need to. In JRB stationary double rope that you just saw, I don't need to set an anchor. But there's a scenario whereby you're in the woods, you put your throw ball up in a tree like this, and it goes down the other side, and let's say for a second that there were 4 branches between these 2 strands of rope. Yeah, you might be able to bobble your throw ball up there and get it to come down properly, but you don't need to monkey around with all that if we simply tie a basal anchor and SRT climb. That's basically the only time I use SRT. So I'm going to do that right now as we talk, but I just wanted you to have some context for it. So I'm gonna create a basal anchor. I'm gonna take this friction hitch on this end of the system out of the way. I'll create a basal anchor out of a JRB hitch. I try to tie these pretty high because why? Well, we're hunters, and I'm sorry, but deer notice this stuff. They notice anything we leave in the tree, and so I try to basically set them fairly high. I've had deer come by and literally sniff the rope at the bottom of the tree, and sometimes they're not happy with it. So I've got a JRB hitch tied and locked. I could use a carabiner, but I'm just going to use the rope. It's locked, ready to take load. Now, on my SRT climb, I have an option. I could climb on this agile hitch, but I'm going to simply slide up the compact non-jamming JRB Ascender. I'm going to get my primary bridge. I'm going to tie into it because JRB Ascender is a little easier to break and move in an SRT. But with that agile hitch there, I'm going to plug it in. It's redundancy. I've got friction hitch redundancy. The JRB Ascender is doing the work, but this will serve as a backup, and I'll just move them both up. Now I could use this foot loop, but I'm not going to because it doesn't have redundancy, but JRB Garda Hitch does. So let's grab the Garda Hitch foot loop, and it's going to look real similar to the climb you just saw. Now, as I start this climb, one consideration when using a basal anchor is that currently, even though I weigh what I weigh, double my weight is on that anchor. The tension in this line is equal to my weight, and so is the other strand on the other side of the tree. So whenever we use a basal anchor, we've got to choose a tree crotch which we trust with double our body weight. Okay, here we go. Okay, there you go. Quick SRT climb. Everything else is the same on Rappel. I'll use a Munter, but I'll use a super Munter when I'm on SRT. Simply put, only one line, need more friction. I showed you how to vary your Munter hitch in prior videos, give you optimal amount of friction. And I'll show off for a second without even taking all of my slack out, which I usually do. I'm going to break my friction hitches and I'll rappel about a foot on just them. But it's so easy to break that JRB Ascender. Okay, so now we're going to do a really quick hitch climb. Again, see prior videos on the channel, but hitch climbing is climbing without the use of a throw ball on a rope-based system with zero slack. All I've really done here, one end of the rope has just got my JRB End Loop. The other one, well, I've pushed both of those agile hitches down to the end of the rope. If it bothered us, we could remove them. Because there's no metal on them, we're able to fashion a hitch and advance it up. These don't bother me. I don't remove them. And I've moved my other friction hitches down towards the middle of the system. All right, so I, in recent videos, have introduced the Maverick Hitch, and that's what I'm going to be tying today, instead of the running JRB Hitch as my anchor. So if I used the short pole, well, you can get an idea how high I'm going to be able to advance that. And don't get me wrong, I probably am more likely to carry this one on an average hunt than the big one. But if you know you're hitch climbing, it really does pay to go for a longer pole. So let's set this. Okay, got my back towards you unintentionally, but all I'm going to do now is set a second hitch on the other side of the system. And I find that with this pole, I generally really don't even need to use the full extent of the move. And so I'm going to grab the other end of the system, tie another hitch, switch onto my my long bridge, and I'll reposition to get on the right side of the tree just a little bit for you. Okay, so I know from experience I am every bit of 25 feet up, and I could have gone higher on that pole. I'm able to choose my position in the tree. This tree is particularly easy because there's no branches on it. If there are healthy branches, I would have used a throw ball, and if there's just a couple, I can rig over it. We'll go over that in a future video. I'm simply going to get on with my rappel now, in which case I will attach my retrieval line to the Maverick and I'll retrieve it from the ground. So that rappel on a super Munter is a little less smooth than my double rope system rappel. And one of the reasons is just that you're on a single line, and the other is that I'm tending a friction hitch on my way down. But recall, I unlocked the Maverick at the top of the climb, and so I can simply release this, and with no branches around the tree, it'll simply drop to my feet. So there you have it. Apologize for needing to edit out or just speed up some of the climb. There's details on the climb on the channel. This is about the system. Let me show you how to coil it up. And again, thanks for your support. And when all is said and done, we've got to coil the system back up. It really doesn't matter which end you work with. I tend to do more doubled rope climbing, so I'll start with the hitch climbing side of the system. I take my JRB End Loop. I generally put the hitches a couple of arms lengths away. I'm making a butterfly coil. I'll capture my foot loop. Just making a butterfly coil. I don't pay too much attention to getting the friction hitches in exactly a particular location. I just like each of the sets to be separated. Got a separate video on making the butterfly coil. But with these end loops, it's a little more convenient because I've got that captured in my hand. When I've got a few feet of this left, I simply will go around a couple of times. And then I'll put a bite through and then lock it with the end. That's all I do. And I'll clip that onto my saddle and I'll walk with that. I don't even use a pack. And that's how I'll walk into the woods. All right, guys, there you have it. That's the universal climbing system. Again, the hitches could be configured in a different way. We could even use different hitches, and we're working on some new hitches. But I just wanted to give you an idea how we can climb 4 different ways with just one system. Thanks as always for your support.